Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, I'm going to be showing you how to make a shop-made beam compass. Now a beam compass is one of those things in your shop that there isn't that much that can take its place. And when you need to draw circles of a larger diameter, a beam compass is the tool for the job. So with that being said now, a beam compass doesn't get used very often in my shop, but when I do need one, I tell you, it's priceless. So we're going to start off with some scrap 3/4 pine. Well, here we have a piece of 3/4 inch pine, and it's about 17 inches long, and it's 2 5/8 wide. The actual dimensions here will vary according to the size of beam compass that you wish to make. But for this particular video and for this show and this demonstration, I'm just showing you the method. And of course you can change it, utilize it, whatever you like to do once you see the method of how I'm going to make this. So I'm going to start off by placing a line at the 1 inch mark at the one edge of this board. Now that one line there at the 1 inch mark, that is going to represent the center of our arm, I guess you would call it, for the compass. I would like the arm to be 1/2 inch wide. So from this center mark, I will come in and draw a line at the 3/4 inch mark, and then 1/4 inch beyond that at 1 1/4 inches, and that will provide me with a 1/2 inch arm. And I hope that you're able to see this with the camera and the lights and all. But the next thing I want to do is I want to come in on this end of my beam compass by 1 1/2 inches. And this end here, this 1 1/2 inches, is going to be the head of the compass. And I would like to have that head of the compass to be 1 inch wide. So from the center mark, we want to come back 1/2 inch from each side. Just like that. Once we have this end marked here, we'd like to come in from the end at 1 1/4 inches. We'll just draw a line across there. And from the end here, we'd like to come in 1/2 inch, just like that. And this mark right here is going to end up being the one that will hold our pencil. And this here will be the through bolt that will, of course, clamp it in. And that will become clearer as time goes on. I'd also like to come in about 2 1/4 inches at this point in time. And what we're going to do now is at that 2 1/4 inch mark in the center of our arm, we are going to drill ourselves a 3/16 of an inch diameter through hole. So you can see that we've got the head of our compass that comes in this way and then comes along this line here. And at this mark that we marked at 1 1/4 inch, we're going to drill a 9/32 inch hole, and that will be to house our pencil. So we have our 9/32 inch hole drilled, and the next step is this line here that we brought in 1/2 inch into our head of our beam compass. We need to transfer that line onto the side surface And right in the middle of this board, we're going to drill a 3/16 of an inch diameter hole all the way through so that it will extend beyond the edge of this head of our beam compass. And with that being marked and center punched, we'll drill the 3/16 diameter hole through. Well, we have that 3/16 hole drilled in through this way on our beam compass. And what I'd like to do now is this center line here between the 3/16 hole and the end of this beam compass, I would like to extend it by 1/32 on either side. And the reason for this is I'm going to want to cut that on a scroll saw, and I'd like a little more than the kerf of the blade to give a gap so that we can pinch down on the pencil. And right now it seems a little confusing, but if you've been following along, this will all become clear in just a moment. As well, what I'd like to do, just to make it a little more aesthetically pleasing, is I want to draw a line. It doesn't matter the distance here, but just so the head is not so abruptly stopping, I just want to taper this head off just like that, so that it looks just a little more pleasing to the eye. Again, this is just a quick beam compass. This is not some kind of showpiece. But that being said, now you can see here what we've got. This being the head of the compass where the pencil goes. This is more of a relief hole that will go in conjunction with this slot to hold our pencil, and then our 1/2 inch lines all the way down our board. So I'm going to take this over to the scroll saw now and cut this thing out. Well, I've got a number 7 reverse tooth blade installed here in the saw, and the first thing that we're going to want to cut out is that line here that we cut the kerf for, that we marked, that we said we want it bigger than the kerf of the blade. So we're going to go ahead and cut that, and you want to try to stay on the lines as much as possible here. There's the one kerf cut out. We had a little bit of a problem with the blade binding there, so that's why we had to reverse it. But now we're going to go ahead and cut the other kerf. And that's the second kerf cut. Now that we have this done, this is where we're going to want to cut along all of our exterior lines all the way along here for our beam compass. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that, and I'll show you what I've got when I'm done. Now that we have this cut out, we have something that looks like this. And what we need to do now is go ahead and just give this a good all over sanding. Take off a little bit of this sharp, abrupt edge, and give it a good sanding. Well, we have this sanded now, and what we're going to do is we need a little bit of hardware, and it's a 1032 bolt and a number 10 washer, and that's just going to go right through this 3/16 hole that we drilled earlier. So that'll go right through all the pieces, and then another number 10 washer, and lastly will be a 1032 wing nut. And that's what we have, just like that. And basically your pencil will go down through this 9/32 hole, and it will tighten up with the wing nut so that it doesn't move. And just like that, that pencil is solidly in there. Well, that is the beam of our beam compass complete. But now, without the pivot point or the axle to spin it, it's kind of useless to us. So now we're going to go ahead and make the axle for it. Well, now you're going to need a piece of scrap pine again for I call it the axle, but I'm probably using the wrong terminology, but it's the point of the compass as opposed to the pencil end of the compass. So in order to make the end that will hold or house the point or the pivot point of our beam compass, we've got another piece of scrap pine here, 3/4 of an inch thick, and we're going to go ahead and do some layout lines here. And what we need is a piece that's 2¼ inches long, so we'll just mark that, and 1.5 inches wide. So we'll just go ahead and mark that as well. And in the center of this piece, what we need is, if you remember, our beam of our beam compass was 3/4 of an inch by 1/2 inch. So we're going to need to mark that opening in the middle for our beam to slide into here. So we're going to come up 3/4 of an inch from the bottom of our piece, and then 3/4 of an inch from the top of our piece. And then if we come in 1/2 inch on either side, what we would end up with here is, once I mark this last mark, an opening in the center. Let me just unclamp this and show you. An opening in the center of 1/2 inch wide by 3/4 high. Now for this here as well, we're going to have to mark the center mark, and at 1.5 inches, the center mark here would be 3/4 of an inch. So we're going to mark it top to bottom all the way along, and just like we did in the beam, we're going to be cutting a kerf in here to assist us in clamping down onto our beam to make it so this holds together and holds securely at the dimension that we would like. Now, due to the length of our bolt, we do need to make a slight modification to this one side here, just to assist us in getting that bolt to fit correctly. So we're just going to make a little offset here, and what that will be is we're going to have a second bolt, and I don't have a longer one, so I'm going to have to modify what I have here. So while I have this bolt lined up here, I might as well mark the center of where it is that I'm going to need to drill that 3/16 of an inch hole on this side here, just like we did with the other piece being the beam. So we now have our center hole mark that needs to be cut out. But if you remember, we need that 1/16 of an inch kerf in the middle. So with that, we come in 3/4 of an inch, and then we're going to go on either side 1/32 just to make that kerf a little bigger, so that it gives something for that thumb screw, or the wing nut rather, to clamp down on when it's in that beam. So let's take this over to the table saw, and I'm going to cut out our one square here, and we can go ahead now and cut the kerf here down into the middle, as well cut out our center piece and our little modification here to allow for our bolt size. So here I have our piece cut, and I've transferred this mark for our bolt around to this back end, marked the center and center punched it, and like I said before, we're going to drill a 3/16 of an inch hole out and straight through the other side. And now that we have that hole drilled, we can go ahead and cut this out here, cut our kerf line, and cut out our center section that we need to remove. Well, I know that thus far this has been a somewhat confusing video. At least it's confusing me, and I'm the one that's doing it. But this is what we've got here, the piece that we've got cut out. And you can see the hole for the bolt, and we've got our kerf here to make it so that we can pinch down when we get the bolt through, and the wing nut on the one side. But what we're missing is the point. And on the bottom end, what I've done is I've transferred this center line, and I've marked it right there in the center. And the last piece of material that we're going to need for this is a nail. And this is a 1-inch nail, and it's got a head on it. But what we need to do is get our calipers and measure the diameter of this nail. And in this case, it's 5/64. So we now need to drill a hole 5/64 of an inch into the bottom of this, centered where this is. From then, this nail will get placed down through this hole and down through the 5/64 hole that you just drilled. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll drill that 5/64 hole. And there is the hole drilled in the bottom end of this, and of course it comes directly up into here. But before we put our hardware into this piece, go ahead and give it a good sanding all over, taking off any rough edges, any of the sharp corners that are around. Give it a good sanding. So the next thing you want to do is, now that you've got this all sanded up, take your 1032 bolt and push it through that 3/16 of an inch hole. And it's a bit of a tight fit, and that's fine because you don't want it to be too loose. Your bolt would always be falling out if that's the case. And then a number 10 flat washer with a 1032 wing nut. From there, what you want to do is this nail, you want to put it down through this hole that you drilled. And it might be a little bit of a trick. You may need to finagle that in there and wiggle it, but you need to get this nail down through so that it protrudes, or the point protrudes through this bottom hole. And there you can see that the point is definitely protruding through the bottom. Well, let's go ahead and put this together now, and I'll show you exactly how this works. So here we have our completed beam compass, and what we've done to set this up is we've made sure that the point of the pencil is at the same distance below the beam as this point. And that just gives you a little more ease of use. Now, this particular beam compass can do anything from a 4-inch circle right up to, I think it's a 34 or 35-inch circle. And it all depends on where you want to slide your pivot point here. Of course, if you want one that's bigger, you just have to make this arm longer. You're really not limited. Just remember, the longer arm that you make, the more flex there's going to be, and there's going to be variations in how well it works. So the bottom line here is that you've got your point. It's going to be held in by the bottom of this beam. So there's really no need to epoxy that in there. But once you have your pivot point here on, you basically slide it on to whichever distance you need to make your circle. Once you've measured half of your circle's diameter here, which would be the radius, so if you need a 4-inch circle, this measurement from point to point would be 2 inches. Once you have that set, just lock in your wing nut. And that is not going anywhere. That's on there dead solid. Your pencil has been tightened down so that that's not going to go anywhere. And it's just like any other compass at that point in time, where you set the point of your nail and you can just draw your circle on whatever material it is that you're working with at the time, whether it be plywood or, in this case, paper. I mean, you're really not limited to the size that you can do. And for larger circles and for larger projects where you need large arcs or large circles, this is incredible. It takes split seconds to make, basically. It's out of scrap material with a little bit of hardware of some 1032 bolts and some 1032 wing nuts. You've got yourself one wickedly awesome beam compass. And there you have it, a beam compass. Guys, if you are in the market for a beam compass for your shop but can't afford the commercially available ones, or maybe you're just frugal and don't want to pay the big bucks that they charge for these, this is an awesome idea, and it does a great job. It's just as good as the ones in the store, and if a part wears out on one of these, you can just make a new part. Give it a try. I know you're going to be happy with this project. I apologize for the makeshift kind of all over the place video, but I was kind of making this one up as I went, and I don't know, for someone who just made it up as he went along, I think it turned out fantastic. So guys, give it a try. Add a shop-made beam compass to your list of projects to do in the near future, and I'm going to see you again next week with yet another woodworking video.